actually was formed and made until it came into a state of revelation.
10 years ago?
Right, 10 years ago. So all these things were still in the Bria. Notice when Hashem made the cell phone, He didn't go into the Orein Sof to go find the material for the cell phone. It was already in the Bria. It just had to come out. But it was already there. So before things come out and they're independent entities, they're much more capable of experiencing the godly revelation. Because they don't really have they have a yesh, but they don't really have a formed yesh. It's kind of like what we say, like when you're in your mother's womb. The lights are on, your mom is learning the whole Torah in there. Right? You're like the most enlightened being in the world. If you think about a pregnant woman going around, there's someone in her womb learning the Kol HaTorah Kula. She's like mamash, an enlightened being walking around. Right? I mean, we don't have the whole Torah walking around inside of us. Right? And yet when you come out, because you get formed, you get born, you're stripped of that state of nullity. And therefore, if you want the Torah, you have to go learn it. Start with Aleph. Start with base. It's a big struggle. It's not so easy to get Kol HaTorah Kula to come into you after you pop out, as it is when you're still inside. And this is the difference between the Yom HaRishon. It was a world, and it was a world where Hashem was one in the world. In other words, every entity in that world experienced only divinity, but it's because they were in a unique state of existence where they didn't really get formed yet. And so it's more or less easy for them to experience divinity and oneness. But once they'll start to get formed, then it's much harder for them to experience that same level of light. And therefore, Yom Shishi, when you have the Avoda is able to get done, and the Avoda is able to bring that level of light, which was so readily available on Yom Rishon, and bring it out into the particulars of the creation, that's the purpose of the world. Right? So that's what we're saying here. So he said, going on, Shabbat Olam, Kamoshu Mitzad Atzmo, that in the world as it is on its own, Kamoshu Nivra B'Yom HaRishon, as it was created on the first day, right? Hu Behelam. So we're saying that this light really is concealed. Meaning to say, there's another thing. This little parenthesis actually gets us deepening this conversation a nice little drop. Because look what he says. If you're careful, this could contradict seemingly what we're saying. Because he says, in the world, kamoshu mitzad atzmo, the world as it is on its own, gam kamoshu nivra b'yom harishon, even as it was created on the first day, this light is concealed. So that seems like not what we just said. Because we said, at least on the day that it was created, on the first day, this light was revealed, right? It's just that when he got the second day, the world wasn't in a position to experience that because the world changed its contours. But what he's saying is that this great light of the Orein Sof and the Atzmus, even on the first day, was not really revealed yet. And why is that? Even as the world was, and why is that?
Yom Rishon or Yom when Adam was created?
No, even on the Yom Rishon, right, when Hashem was one in His world, the true light of the Orein Sof and the Atzmus, it really was not totally revealed yet. And why is that? Okay. You understand what I'm saying? We just got through saying that it was revealed. Yes. That's why this should be a contradiction, right? Right. And that's why the Rabbi says, Gam Kamoshin Nivra B'Yom HaRishon. He's trying to emphasize something, that the true light of the Atzmus, even as it was on the first day, was not truly revealed. And why is that? Because, as we sort of discuss all the time, the lower you go, if you want to get light to go lower, you need to go to a higher light in order to get it down so low. Right? Like we've been discussed at great length in the last mimer, that the more humble you are, the more levels of makif you can attain. Right? In other words, there's many, many levels of up. So if you can bring divinity into a lower place, you must go to a higher place in order to get it to come down so low. As the saying goes, what's higher falls lower. Right? So the idea is that the potential of the Orein Sof and the Atzmus, which was sitting inside the Yom Rishon, it was not really fully able to show itself because there wasn't a tachton for it to go into. So only until the world would actually delineate its parts, which would set up a scenario of a real tachton, a yesh, which did not perceive Hashem, only then could you bring the true level of the Orein Sof, whose power is that it can show itself high and low equally. In other words, that the true essence of Hashem does not have any limitations. It can show itself just as equally into the lowest parts as it can into the highest parts. But you have to initiate the lowest parts to be there in order to summon that light. So long as there wasn't really yet the lowest parts, the true Or Ein Sof and the Atzmos could not, it was always Behelim. It couldn't actually express itself, because it only expresses itself when there is something lower to go into.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying there?
Well, that's the purpose.
And that's the purpose. And therefore there was an inability to do that until someone had the power to do it. So what happened on day 2, 3, 4, and 5 is that it created the Tachton and 6. And when Adam HaRishon came into the game, he was the one who enabled that light to now be able to draw down into the Tachton. And therefore it was really a higher light that he was even available on the first day. Because the first day, that light which could be drawn into the Tachton was only in potential, because there was no Tachton. Get it?
Tachton is
The lower, something lower. You understand?
and that was in Garden Eden. That was in the actual vessel of Adam.
That was, the Tachton is just like the formation of the world coming out of the first day. And it was after the first day.
There wasn't much of a Tachton in that first day.
There was, the first day there was already something of a Tachton, right?
You mean in potential or like in creation?
I'm saying the first day was already something of a Tachton. There was creation, right? It was a Bria. But the second day, it was already beginning of formation. So that's Mamash a Tachton. It means things were separated from the Klal, right? The Prat was separated from the Klal.
Right.
So it didn't have the experience of the Klal anymore.
It's kind of used to and used to and used to
Right.
every day.
That has to be before Bria, then.
What has to be before
This
Bria?
process where it was all one.
No, in Bria, it was all one.
Not like
In
the Atzilus.
Yeah.
That's already like when the light went through the 5 worlds, right?
The 5 what?
The world.
The 5 Gvuros.
That's like like the right, like the final letters. Like every letter is like sort of infinite.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. First of all, know that those contractions of the 5 Gvuros, they start up in Atik. In other words, there's always 5 Gvuros. The question is, when do they show themselves?
Right.
When do they actually make things separate? So in Bria, they didn't make things separate. They made the Bria in general separate. In other words, as opposed to there only being one thing,
Right.
there's now two things: God and His creation. But the creation is one. There's no details in the creation yet.
Until it gets to Yisrael.
But the next step, that's when everything starts to go into parts. Let's go on. Oof, we're mamish slow, taking our time over
God
here,
is
this baby.
creation with, or God and the creation is one, or just the creation as well?
Well, at that level, there is a creation,
Right.
but its experience is that all there is God. In other words, it's nullified to Hashem. In other words, it's the perfect point of creation. The only problem is that it hasn't really flushed itself out yet to be a proper creation. And should it, you'll see that was not the proper creation. That was not the purpose and function of creation, because there was still a lower level of diffraction of the parts, and therefore the light that is required to unite all those parts had not yet really been summoned. And that's what we're saying. The lower you go, the higher of a light you need in order to reunite everything. Alright, so let's go on. Yesh Lomar, Dezeu Sha'amar Razal, that's what the sages said, Or Shanivra B'yom Rishon Lo Haya Olam Kadai Lishtamish Bo. That the light of the first day, the world was not able to use it. In other words, that in reality, that light, which potential was like the Mashiach light, the world was not yet in a state to actually get it to come into it, because that light only comes in when you have parts. It was the essential light of God, and it was found in the first day, but because the world wasn't really enough, the world was not able to use it yet, because it can only come out when the world breaks up into parts. So it was there, but it was there only in potential. It says Hashem separated for Himself. This world is completely above the world. Particularly, as it says in many places, the perush of and godel ha'ilui of havdilu la'atzmo. This phrase of He's separated for Himself is that it's separated entirely from the world. It's all to Himself, and the world at that stage, where it was created on Yom Rishon, was not able to access that light. And it was in the world at that time, but to be revealed, it couldn't come out for the reasons that we've said at great length. I hope everyone's following. If not, now's your last chance to ask a question on that, but let's just say you're following.
Do you think beyond the idea that in order for the light to descend to the lowest realms, it has to be higher?
What'd you say? I didn't hear you.
That the light needs to ascend higher in order to come to the lower realms.
Right.
Was that the last thing you said?
That's the last thing we said, yeah.
That's what we're at.
I'm not sure if this is related, but like, you're talking about how like the light has to go to the lowest.
The purpose of creation is that it should, yeah.
Yeah, then okay, so then what was the purpose of the flood? I mean, God...
The purpose of the flood was that it was all in the same direction. In other words, Hashem wanted to bring the light to the lowest places, but the world was so corrupt that it was unable at that time to experience that light. So as the Alter Rebbe explains, the flood was a purification of the earth. It was not just a punishment. If it was a punishment, Hashem had much less messier ways of destroying all flesh of the earth and like bring this crazy clumsy flood, because it was a mikvah that purified the earth.
Yeah.
The idea therefore is that he was ultimately trying to bring his light into the world, but he needed to purify the earth in order that the world could be sensitive enough to experience the light. So the flood was all part of bringing the light down. There needed to be a stage of purification. In fact, that's the whole process of every day. It's another level of flood. This, that you're able to bring the light into the lowest world, we're saying it's through avoda, right? Avoda is the flood. It's the destruction of yourself every single day. You have to do yourself over and remove your blockages and get rid. So that's how you bring the light into the world. In other words, it looks like it's the opposite. You're destroying the world, but it's really a gevura, which is for the sake of chesed. You follow?
Yeah, that's a really great explanation. I love it.
Okay, the Alter Rebbe's comes in handy sometimes. All right, so Gimel. But we don't have time for anything, so we have to stop talking about the limbs and the tree, going off the limb there. I think we're just out of time, so we'll start tomorrow. What's that? It's a what? It was a hot mikvah. Burning hot.